everyone, this is 1 year on. Hello everyone, this is 1 year on. I'm Alison. And following on from episode 27, today's episode is about the things I was surprised about going back to Scotland. I travelled back to Scotland for the first time in 7.5 years. That's a long time between drinks. I had been in regular contact, of course, with my parents and friends, so I wasn't completely disconnected, but of course there is talking about things and experiencing it for yourself. As I've mentioned before, my parents moved from the part of town I grew up in to the complete opposite side of town. I had been there only once 7 years ago on my last visit in winter. And in a time where there was a lot less daylight, so less ability to spend getting to know a place looking around. When I lived in Scotland, I never had need to go to that part of town, so it was completely new to me. And my parents moving there was a bit of a shock and surprise to suddenly realise that going home wasn't going home. My memory of the city has changed a lot. The part of the town I grew up in, I'm good with that. I didn't forget any of the roads and could easily navigate happily my way around there. Having lived there for 25 years of my life, that's ingrained, but the newer part of town is still not ingrained in there. That is a totally different kettle of fish. I'm still in the active learning phase, and with a new brain now, hopefully a new and improved brain, my memory of the city has changed a lot. It's really weird. The drivers once were very respectful in their driving manner. They're now aggressive and drive way beyond the speed limit. That really surprised me. The motorway maximums are 70 miles an hour. Some parts are 60 miles an hour on the motorway. And there were people tanking along at 80 miles an hour or more. That really shocked me. I was also very surprised at the cultural and ethnic mix in the city, which has changed a lot, and I think that's a really good thing. There are so many more cultures in the city now. It's just become more like a place like I live in Australia, which is hugely multicultural. I always thought when I grew up in Scotland that it was very homogenous with a few different ethnic groups, but not as many. But it's now an explosion of cultures, and I didn't see just an influx of tourists. These were the locals wandering around shopping centres, looking like locals, not just tourists. I saw lots of tourists, of course, as we went to castles and other places where tourists usually go to. And being amongst them was good too. Incidentally, Edinburgh, there were more American tourists, while up in Inverness there were more French tourists, and that really surprised me. Where I live, we have what could be called a complex junction, but it's nothing of the sort compared to Scotland. It's an interchange, 4 roads coming together, and all roads ending up going in all directions. It works well enough, but where I went overseas was a complete and absolute nightmare. I mentioned it in my driving episode. It really surprised me how much I struggled with the complexity of the spaghetti junctions, and how Google Maps and the car sat-nav were absolutely useless for me. Being someone who's used to navigate and finding my way around, I was surprised at how much I struggled with that, and I struggled with my struggle. I struggled a lot with my parents' house, struggled with the busyness of the household and the space. I struggled with having no respite from the people there, the fact that we were all crammed in, and it was a significant change to my home in Australia, which is calm and peaceful, and we've got enough space, and obviously less people. My parents have got a small home, which is perfect for them. And then myself and my 2 teenage kids moved in, and then my niece, who's 9, and she's an energetic 9-year-old. A noisy one at that too. So the small house was bulging at the seams with 3 times the amount of people who normally live there. I always said I wouldn't go back to Europe in winter because of the darkness and misery of the short days and lack of daylight hours. I never thought I would complain about summertime in Scotland and the flux between the two. At 10:30, 11 at night, it still wasn't pitch black, and it never really got pitch black. And by 4 o'clock in the morning, it was broad daylight again, and the birds were ready for the day. That really affected my sleep. I was sleeping in a room with no curtains, so an eye mask was needed. And it's amazing how disruptive that actually was. Usually I would wake up around 4 o'clock. That was all right if I could get back to sleep, and if I couldn't, it really wasn't good. One thing that surprised me was the lack of fresh food in Scotland. Almost everything is imported, and there is so much packaging around imported foods. Supermarkets are full of processed foods and packaged foods, and the fruit and vegetables are a small portion of the produce. I go to a farmer's market where I live for most of the fruit and vegetables we consume. And the only fresher fruit or vegetable would be where you're growing it yourself. So it was really confronting to be buying fruit that went off soon after, and with the amounts of packaging that you simply can't get away from because everything's like that. There is hardly any vegetable or fruit that's available loose. And that was a massive surprise and change. I don't think it's the best thing for the health and nutrition of the population there, as the time between something being picked and eaten with transportation would be higher than what I am able to get, and the nutrients in the food start to degrade from the moment you pick it. I yearned for the freshness of the food I had in Australia. I yearned for the quality of the fresh food I had in Australia. Also, having to throw stuff out was shocking, and you couldn't see what you were buying because of all the packaging, to be having a clear visibility of the product. I really didn't like that. I usually examine everything I buy when it's loose, and I buy whatever I can as unblemished as possible. Another thing that was confusing was the amount of recycling bins and the complexity of undertaking recycling. We've got 3 bins: the ordinary rubbish for landfill, the recycling, and the third bin is green waste, which is garden rubbish, leaves and grass clippings and such like. In Scotland, where I was, there was a lot more complex system, and I was forever asking my dad, which bin does this go in? It's remarkable how you get set in your ways. I was also surprised at how expensive some things were in the UK. Eating out was horrendously expensive. Some of it, I suppose, was the tourist tax, but not all. I did manage to find reasonably priced foods in cafes. Some cafes, I should say, but overall it's daylight robbery. Food in the supermarkets was very well priced, and that's probably because there's a lot of competition, with 8 major retailers of supermarkets within a 10 to 15 minutes drive of my parents' house. And the biggest thing that surprised me and upset me was how my speech is still affected when I'm under extreme stress. At one point I was rendered unable to speak. Nothing was there. My world in Australia is so very different to my world in Scotland, and I'm glad I was able to give my kids the opportunity to see my family again. I don't know when I will next be able to go. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share and subscribe. I will be back next time to talk about my approach to fatigue while I was away.